أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I hope that every one of you are doing well. As always, thank you so much for being here. We always appreciate seeing every single one of you at our Deen Talks programming. Before I get started, I wanted to give my condolences and also shed some light on the current event that's happening in Gaza and Palestine, and also in Afghanistan. May Allah protect and give protection to our brothers and sisters that are overseas, and that's the best that we can do. And any support that we can provide, try to do the best that you can, inshallah. Today's programming is brought to you by the Islamic Center of Your Berlin Masjid, the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California, and Qazizada Multicultural Therapy Clinic. Today we've got a very special guest speaker who is, I would say, is somebody who I got the chance to be friends with. I know for me he was one of the very few folks, but maybe one of the first folks actually, within the community who I met when I moved to Orange County. And I believe that was the same year you came to Orange County as well. So we are great friends. Our families know each other. Inshallah, our kiddos are going to play with each other pretty soon. Both of us have baby girls. So they're about 2 months apart. So inshallah, we'll take them to play dates.
Can't wait, man. Can't wait.
To say today's program and the topic that we're going to discuss is youth and identity. And for that, we have Sheikh Tarik with us, who is the religious director for Orange County Islamic Foundation at Mission Viejo Masjid. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So the question I wanted to ask you is, how is one's identity developed?
Yeah, it's a huge question.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's so big is our current era has introduced ideas that are unknown to all of human history. We call it the modern era. And with the Industrial Revolution, with the, loosely speaking, the democratization of societies, the introduction of the nation state, all these are new or somewhat new to the realm of society. And they have a profound effect on how we view the world as well as how we view ourselves. So for example, what is an ethnicity? What is a race? Right? When we say we're Americans, what does that mean? Right? It means that there is this piece of land with literally artificial lines, and if you're in it, you're an American. If you're not in it, you're not American. Right? And so, as one person puts it, somebody here in, let's say, in Southern Orange, South SoCal, shares more of an identity with somebody 3,000 miles away in New York than somebody who lives an hour and a half away just across the border of Mexico, right? This is new stuff. And so with that came a lot of challenges when it comes to, well, who am I? Who am I? How do I understand myself? And it's a very complex topic because of kind of this, what I just mentioned right now. And if we don't learn how to understand it, then we fall into a type of pit, a type of abyss where I just don't know how to view myself. And then when you add on top of that consumer culture, right? Consumer culture, which gives you this idea where indulge. Just that's what you're meant to do. You focus on externalities rather than on internalities. You have a lot of problems here. And so, an individual I'm sure you're aware of, Viktor Frankl, who is a pioneer of a field of therapy called logotherapy. And logotherapy is essentially this attempt to heal people by helping them find purpose in their situation, in what they're doing. And he gives a lot of very beautiful examples. Now, he is somebody who was in the Holocaust. He was in there in the concentration camps. And while he was there, he says that I looked at the people around me, and I also looked at the environment around me. He said we were surrounded by ugliness. Everything was ugly. You can only imagine, right? But he said that what I noticed and what was really an epiphany for me is that some people succumb to it. Right? They accepted their reality. He said while other people were able to see beauty despite all the ugliness. And the question became, well, how? We're all in the same place. We're all seeing the same thing. Yet here you have person A who has succumbed to the situation, has pretty much accepted demise, while another person is able to see the beauty around him. And so he goes into this idea, well, what is the purpose? Right? How do I create purpose? And that's a huge question that Islam comes to answer. Islam gives it straight up. Our purpose in life is to worship Allah. But in Islam, worship means a relationship. Just to kind of be brief here. It's a relationship. And what you'll notice in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the creation of the human being, and really look at this. Every time you read verses in the Quran about Allah saying He created you, or He created humanity, you'll always find two things with it. Always. One, He starts off by saying He created you. And number two, it's almost always, if not always, followed up by saying you return to Him. Why is this so significant? Because essentially Allah is telling you what your origins are, what you're doing here, and where you're going. And so when you read books that talk about the question of identity, you find these three things always coming up. And this isn't necessarily religious, or so in therapy you'll find it. In philosophy you'll find it. I'm reading a book right now about strong daughters, or strong fathers, strong daughters. Right? I'll send you the link. It's a pediatrician, a lady pediatrician. She had 4 children of her own. And she does therapy in her work. She talks to young ladies, and young ladies come to her with certain problems and want depression, etc. And so, through her work, she was able to understand, okay, why are some girls strong and some girls weak? And she said that what really makes a difference is the father figure. It really does. Not to say the mothers are irrelevant or insignificant, but the father plays a huge role. Why? And she mentions that your daughter needs to know where she comes from, what she needs to do now, and where she's going. This is, if you don't have the answers to these 3 questions, it becomes very difficult to know who you are and to know what to do. Right? I'll give you an example. If you're in college, but you still haven't decided what you want to major in, how are you going to choose your classes? You'll choose your electives, right? But once you finish your electives, well, what do I need to do? I don't know what classes to take, because I don't know where I'm going. Now that's true for life. Right? So this notion, for the young ones here, Thor 4, the latest installment of the Thor movies, right? In the what's it called, the commercial, or what is it called, the word is slipping my mind, the trailer, there you go, thank you. In the trailer, right, it literally says, live in the moment, or something along these lines, live in the moment. And that's the dumbest advice. It's really bad. Why? Because I can't live in the moment unless I know where I'm going. How can I choose what I need to do now if I don't know where I'm going tomorrow? It doesn't make sense. So in order to have identity, you need to know where you're going, because it helps you understand what you need to do now. But you also need to know where you come from. And in this book I just mentioned, she gave statistics about the health of children in terms of family dynamics. And she showed different scenarios, possibilities. I'm sorry, it wasn't that book, it was The Boy Crisis, similar book, where you have a family where both biological parents are married and present, versus a child growing up in a single parent home, biological parent, and a child growing up in under adoption. So 2 parents, but adopted parents. And what they found was the following. This is really a shock to me. They found that, obviously, a child who grows up with their both biological parents married do the best. And when I say do the best, what I mean by that is they're less likely to get into social deviance, do drugs, to get into jail, to fail school, etc. But what really shocked me was children fare better when one of their biological parents are present over when two foster parents are present. Right? You'd think that, okay, well, if mom, foster dad are together, you have both, and that would be more advantageous to the child than just one biological parent. But no, it's not true. And we've all seen movies, heard movies, stories, etc. about, the kid who grew up in a good family, a healthy environment, but adopted, and they just can't get it out of themselves. They have to know who my parents are. It's not enough. Right? They need to know what their origins are. And that's just how humans are created. Allah wired it in us. We need to know where we are. So in order to form identity, you need to have the variables necessary. What are they? Where do you come from? What are you doing now? Why are you here now? Where are you going? And the Quran answers this a lot of times. Allah created you. You worship Him. And you're going to the afterlife.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So much information. Now, I know you talked about family. Wanted to ask the importance of family engagement with their children. Mm-hmm. How important is that?
Oh, you have no idea. It is the most important thing. Parents are they're afraid. Right? They're scared. They're concerned.
And the reason why I ask is that I know in therapy we get a lot of youngsters coming with their parents. And one of the common things that we usually see is that the youth and the parent don't see eye to eye.
Yeah, they're disconnected.
They're very disconnected, right? So where does that stem from? And what can the parents do?
Right. So parents' involvement in their child's life is everything. And parents are afraid because they think it's a very complex thing, when really it's not, right? The fear of once my daughter's a teenager, she wants to be alone, she doesn't want to be talked to, and the parents become a little bit more distant, thinking that they're giving the child space and that's better for them, when really that's not how it works, right? We think we need super fancy methods, when really it's not, right? Having an argument with your child, although it seems heated, is actually communicating something to the child that I care about you, whether they say it or not, whether they realize it or not, right? Children, or even teenagers, they're still formulating a way of seeing the world, but these things do matter. Now, going back to your question, how can they connect with them? And when there's a disconnect, what's the problem? What I see most common personally, and I'm sure you have even more experience than me in this regard, is that when there is an emotional disconnect, that's where the problem is. Language barrier, yeah, right, that creates challenges, but it's not what makes or breaks the relationship. Quite the contrary, growing up, my parents are immigrants, my mom still does have, sometimes she says things incorrectly when she types, it doesn't make sense or whatnot. But to us, it's kind of cute, right? It's funny. It's not what makes or breaks. What makes or breaks is the emotional involvement. And what we see very often, and I'm just going to be frank, in immigrant households, right? It's normally the father that's emotionally disconnected from his children. Where what I mean by that is he comes home, he just sits on the TV and doesn't really engage his children. And when he's home, he's quiet, I don't want to hear any noise, I'm tired, etc. Right? And that's where the disconnect begins. Where the father just wants to relax. He had, rightfully so, he wants to rest a little bit, recover, and he doesn't really want all the headaches. But what the child understands is, when my father is home, I can't be myself. When my father is home, I'm confined. When my father is home, he doesn't talk to me, he's not interested, that means he's not interested in me. That's the way the child sees it, right? And of course, there are many cases of mothers doing this, where they're more concerned about social things, and where are you going, girl, let's go to this party and that party, and the children are just, yes, go hang out with your friends. That's also really bad, right? So it's that emotional connection. Now, there are a lot of things that parents can do to be emotionally connected. And I think for us who are American-born, now have children who are American-born, it's a lot easier. Why? Because for my son, for example, he watches the same shows I used to watch when I was a kid. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? He likes dinosaurs, I used to like dinosaurs. So it becomes easy to connect. But for parents, I mean, you don't need that. What you need to do, sit with your child while they're watching the show and just have fun with them while they watch it, right? And have, so why did that person, oh, that's crazy. No, I like that. When they see that you like the things that they like, that's a connection right there. For them, that's the emotional bond.
Something you said very important, and I wanted to ask is and also bring it up, because this is something that we see, is you said children are not themselves around their parents. And one thing that we usually hear in our field of psychology is there's a theorist by the name of Erik Erikson. He did a study, a longitudinal study, that means that over a period of time, a long period of time, where he took data from the time a child is born till the day they die. Okay? So he did a study, and so there are 8 stages to that study. And the 5th stage talks about identity versus identity confusion stage. That is a stage where the child is between the ages of 12 to 18. So what that study does is, the study found out that there's 2 things that usually happen and how the study goes. One, when you talk about identity, either the child, the youth, creates an identity, or they have identity confusion. Identity is, for example, when you said, your child or my child, when they grow up, they are watching the same cartoons or the programs, or we have the same common interest, or maybe the same way of communicating with one another. That allows the child, and that doesn't mean that that's not true for immigrant parents either, but when it comes to having a strong identity, usually these kids are resilient, they are pretty comfortable with who they are. Now, when we talk about identity, there's different things, right? You talk about, when it comes to gender, when it comes to political view, educational, level of how much education you've had in the past. So there's different variations. So for a child who is very secure in their identity, they're comfortable with who they are, basically. Very comfortable. They're calm, they can be themselves around their parents. They can goof off, they can do what they want to, because that is them. Now, a child who goes through identity confusion, that's where, I think one of the things you hit pretty well is, this is where the child is not themselves around their parents. So they're one way, in the house, and then when they go out, they're totally somebody else. Their personality differs. They're not comfortable with their identity being shared around the people they love. But we have to ask the question, why is that? Yeah. And at the same time, this individual tries to fit themselves and trying to figure out what identity fits them well. And usually the ones that have identity confusion usually are insecure, and it causes confusion when it comes to their personality, when it comes to their identity of who they will be. And that's a big, there's a lot of youngsters currently that are going through this struggle.
Oh yeah.
And this is something research actually shows, and it has picked up. So I just wanted to kind of add that in, because research actually shows this is the fact of the reality.
Yeah, and it goes back to the question, like, why? Why is it so prevalent in, let's say, Western societies, or maybe even developed societies? And I think one of the reasons is that because of the modern age and the way the modern world is structured, it doesn't really give you an identity. You have to kind of figure it out on your own. And what makes things even worse is that they take very important experiences of the human being, and they give incorrect definitions, like happiness. So what would you say is a definition of happiness? Like, as per the American language, as per the culture, when you ask an average American, what do you think they would say the meaning of happiness is?
Achieving the American dream.
Right. Which is what? House and whatnot.
Having a salary job, being safe, spending time with family.
Sure, right? But even if you look at the younger generation, they would define happiness as enjoyment. I'm enjoying something right now. But is that really the definition of happiness? And then think about it, like happiness is so integral to the well-being of a human being. And if you get that definition wrong, that essentially shifts your entire worldview and your paradigm. Now in Islam, the scholars like Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi, they define happiness. Like they give it a definition. And the definition they give it is contentment. And you want to know what's interesting? If you go to the dictionary and you look at the thesaurus and you look at the synonyms for happiness, one of them is contentment. Right? But the world got it wrong. Now, if a person's view of happiness is enjoyment, well, I enjoy food, I enjoy playing video games, I enjoy watching movies, I enjoy doing things, I enjoy money, right? But what they're trying to put things in them that they assume will provide them with happiness. But what is money? Money is a piece of paper, right? What can it offer you? It cannot offer you anything. It's just a piece of paper, right? So they're trying to put in themselves things that doesn't provide anything because, well, they're inanimate objects. Versus contentment. Instead of trying to look for happiness externally and bring it internal, when it's about contentment, it's internal that now warps your external, right? So, just, happiness, identity, you want to be happy, but you got to get the definitions right. And the Western world, unfortunately, it's all over the place, to the extent that a huge, philosopher of the Western world that shaped a huge part of the Western world is Rousseau. And Rousseau says the purpose of life is self-fulfillment, like self-fulfillment in terms of, doing things that make you happy as per the definition that I just gave of enjoyment. Why? How did he come to this conclusion, so to speak? Well, he looked at the world. He said, okay, God created this. Why did he create this? Right? He's looking at the way things work. Well, if I look at the sky, I feel a little bit of joy, right? If I eat some food, I feel a little bit of joy. Oh, God created me so that I just have fun. That's literally his conclusion. But compare that to the Islamic paradigm where, no, that's only a part of it. You're here to get to know Allah, to build a relationship with Allah, temporarily, till you get to the afterlife. And so look at the difference. Who will be able to truly build an identity that is concrete, that is able to function properly in all circumstances? Westerners, when life gets tough, well, what are we seeing going on? I'll just go ahead and end my life. Yet, you're from Afghanistan. Is there a suicide endemic in Afghanistan? Not that I heard of. In Palestine, right? People in Gaza right now, they're going through you don't hear people committing suicide, despite the impossible circumstances they're in. Well, why? What's the difference? Because one says, we die and we go to the afterlife, right? Versus, what is all of this? So.
Yeah. And one thing that usually that comes up for us is the notion of role models in the community, right? A lot of the younger generation, even myself, there's times where I look up to folks, or I watch figures. Now it's like certain figures that are influencers or speakers. Same way, I wanted to ask you this question: does role models affect identity development, would you say?
Everybody has a role model. Everybody. Whether they know it or not. And essentially what a role model does is it influences your decisions. Right? Everybody has a role model to the extent the role model for humanity has role models. And why does Allah keep talking about Musa alayhi salam in the Quran? Why does he keep talking about Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran and all these prophets? Right? To be a role model for the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So everybody has a role model, whether we realize it or not, whether we admit it or not, and that role model is influencing the way we see the world and our decisions. And so the correct way of approaching this isn't to say, should I have a role model or not, but rather, I need to know who is my role model. Right? And of course, as parents, we want to make sure that our children have the correct role models. Or else, if we don't guide them to the correct role models, or if we're not their role models, they're going to find it elsewhere. And it might not be, the people we want them to have as role models. But what is the role of a role model? Why is it so important? Well, think of it. Imagine, for all of you, imagine a time where you were going through something difficult. You were going through a difficulty, you didn't know what to do, you didn't have guidance in that regard. Right? Imagine that situation. Now imagine somebody comes, right, who has already gone through that and has reached the goal you're trying to reach. And he comes and he sits down with you. And he says, or she says, "You're going through X, Y, and Z?" "Yeah, I went through that." What is automatically going to happen to you? You feel a sense of relief. Why?
Relatability.
Relatability, but also a glimpse into the future. It's a glimpse into the future. This person has walked the path you're trying to walk. And you can see where that path will lead you through this person. So it becomes worth it. So all the stories of the prophets in the Quran, there's a huge message for the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, right? If you follow their way, this is a model for you. You will end up where they ended up. And where all the prophets end up? Of course, paradise, but in terms of the stories, they end up successful in this life. They won in this life. They were victorious in this life. They persevered. They were able, Allah defeated their enemies for them. Essentially telling the Prophet, the companions, look at these people. If you follow their footsteps, you will end up in the same place. That's what role models do. So they help alleviate a lot of the stress because it feels super good when somebody you look up to, and you look up to them because they reach the place you aspire to be, and they tell you, "I remember going through that." It helps make your situation more digestible. Right? You see, wait a minute, if they've gone through it, then this is a normal part of life. A lot of times, these young ones, they go through difficulty, they think it's not normal. So why is this happening? Why is this going on? No, it's a normal part of life. Right? Especially when newlyweds they get married and "Sheikh, I have a problem." Like, "What's your problem?" It's like, the other day, a young man came to me, he's like, "Sheikh, I'm engaged, and I'm having doubts." I'm like, "Why, what's wrong? What's going on?" He's like, "You know what? It's getting harder for me to wake up for Fajr. And now I want to back off." Right? And I said, "Do you know why? Because you're busy with her. Welcome to life." Right? That's normal. This happens. You need to adjust. And I wait till you have to deal between your mother and her, right? That's a whole different paradigm. But it's normal. You have, I'm sure you've gotten this as well. I've had so many newlyweds come to me and they have problems and I say, "Yeah, it's pretty normal." Like, it's normal? It's perfectly normal. Welcome to life. Your relationship is correct.
You
right?
won't believe it. When we get couples come to us, they're together for even 2 months, and they're already over it. Because it's so difficult for them, and it's so hard for them to look forward to the future. Because they feel as that this is it, and this is how the future is going to be. So it is one of those things where I think you pinpointed very importantly. How can the youth? Let's start with the parents, right? I think you said something very importantly. This is something we see in our field as well. The bond that usually is between the difference between the mother and the father, and the bond that they have with their kids. And what we realize and what we've seen is moms are usually more hands-on, and they're also emotionally connected with their children. Fathers, because of they don't spend too much time, they don't see the kids as much, and then when they come, they're tired. They're just there to provide some discipline, so they don't see the fun stuff at times from fathers. But as they get older, it becomes challenging, right, to also sit with your kid and also talk to them at certain times. But what can parents do from earlier on, from early stages, where they can create that emotional bond with their kids?
Yeah, so the earlier you start, the better. And I don't want anyone to feel down because my kids are older and I passed that. But for those of us who have younger kids or maybe have yet to have kids, this is very important. The earlier you start, the better, the easier. Because every child is born and their early years, they look up to their parents. Their parents are the only role model. Their entire world is their parents, and they're in deep love with their parents. So the role of the parents is not to build love, but actually to preserve it. So Allah has done the heavy work for us. So to preserve that, how do we preserve that? Well, one, as we mentioned earlier, you have to let them be, right? I have a son, 5 years old, and growing up, he's jumping all over the place. He's yelling, he's screaming, he's going on the couch and jumping, and I'm stop. Until I sat with myself and I said, he's acting like a 5-year-old. It's normal. And then once I, accepted that, I'm not bothered by it.
But how did you come to acceptance though?
Well, I learned, right? Well, I learned. That's natural. And I should say, alhamdulillah, 1,000 times that my son is acting normally, right? Alhamdulillah. So you embrace. That's how Allah created him. Should I change the way Allah has created His creation? It makes no sense. And this is why I don't like the education system. Not education, the system. That takes these 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, who just want to play and have fun, and they put them in seats for 7 hours a day, and just sit down. And then they get antsy and they want to move and you have ADHD. Or maybe he's just behaving like a 5-year-old, right? So you have to let them be. And when the kids see that I can be in front of my parents who I am, that creates that type of trust. That's one. Number two, I understand, as a father and as my work schedule is everywhere and so is yours, the fact of the matter is it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse. I can go down to my child can't come up to me. Right? He can't. I could. And so I have to teach myself, when I go home, I gotta be the father. And yeah, sometimes I just want to sit down, sometimes I do, and I don't do the best job. But the child wants to play. And that is a golden opportunity to play and to bond. That's what he wants to do. The other day they did donuts with Dad at my son's kindergarten. And they prepared everything in a song, and they had the children fill out like a sheet. And it says, my dad's name is so-and-so, and my dad's age is so-and-so. He almost got it right, maybe a little bit younger, alhamdulillah. And then, my dad's hair color is this, and his eye color is this. And he starts saying, my dad likes to go to fill in the blank. And he said Sky Zone. Sky Zone's a trampoline, right? They go and they try. My dad likes to go to Sky Zone. And my dad likes to fill in the blank. He said swim. And then, of course, he's talking about himself. Right? It's him who likes to go to Sky Zone. And he just thinks I like doing it because I go with him. It's him who likes to swim. He just thinks I like doing it because I go with him. So notice how he's seeing this. And then at the end it says, and the thing I love doing most with my dad is playing dinosaurs with him. Right? So you can do something like this at home, and you can get the information out of your child. And when a father or a mother sees this, it just melts the heart. Right? It's like, oh, this is how important this is to you? We tend to forget it. We're busy with our things. So you just do it. You have to bond with them. And then a third thing that's super important that our cultures are very bad at, and that is not getting angry. It's not getting angry. And learning how to discipline our children without anger. And it's doable. Right? And so, for example, personally, when I discipline my son, I do it with a smile on my face. And when he's misbehaving and I need to put him in timeout, I do it in a way where I'm having fun doing this. Of course, he understands, he gets it, but he doesn't see like a vicious father. And Sheikh Hassan, I don't know what your topic is with him once he comes. He has some really interesting insights. He says, your child sees Allah the way he sees you. That's how he's going to understand Allah. And so if you can show him a well-rounded personality where there's a lot of leniency, a lot of forgiveness, but there are red lines. You show generosity, but you also show wisdom, right? Yeah, I'm going to be generous with you, but I'm not going to give you everything you want, right? That's what we need to show our children. So for example, if after, your child misbehaves, you get upset at them, you put them in timeout, and now they want to come and apologize, don't be stubborn about it, right? Don't say, nope, I don't believe your apology. Because what enters the mind of the child? That Allah is very difficult to repent to. But if the father, as soon as says, I'm sorry, oh, thank you, and hugs them and kisses them, what is internalized in their mind? That if I say, oh Allah, please forgive me, then Allah is all forgiving. So these are three things. Of course, this is by no means the end-all be-all, and I'd love to actually hear what else you have to offer in this regard.
No, absolutely. Just piggyback on what you said. One thing that you said very importantly, how you act in front of your child is very important, because from an earlier age and from a young age, usually children, they'll create an image in their mind. So if you're acting a certain way, or if you are, again, it's very important. I think you said something very important in terms of when it comes to anger. I think anger, it's usually misunderstood. It's usually not anger directly towards your child. It's usually frustration and overwhelmingness that we usually hear. And that's what usually causes a lot of the anger from parents, because they're frustrated, right? As human beings, we get frustrated. There's times where I get frustrated with my own kid, or even the baby. And then at times I have to tell my wife, hey, I'm getting overwhelmed and I'm getting frustrated. I think I might snap. And I'm a human being, I go out, I'm working. My work revolves around people. Talking to people, me speaking for a long time. it's a lot of talking, so it puts a lot of stress and a lot of weight on your mind. And that means that, there's times where either while you're speaking mentally, physically, you get tired. And usually at this moment of time, it's always important, and something that we suggest for parents when they're working with their youth and with their kid is, make sure that the both of you are on the same page when it comes to parenting your child. Mm-hmm. Same. Huge. Especially in America, it has to be the same, because if you don't have a unified family structure, guess what happens? If mom does one thing and dad does another, the child is very smart. They're going to want to favor the parent where they know they can get more out of that. Mm-hmm. So kiddos are very smart. So you have to be ahead of the game, where I always tell parents, both mothers and fathers, that when it comes to your kids, try to be at their school programmings. When it comes to creating a structure in the house, make sure that both of you are aligned with what are the do's and what are the don'ts. So I'll give you an example. So, for instance, if your child comes to you, if you're the mother or the father, right? And you don't want your child to do something at this moment. You don't want them to watch TV. You want them to go read right now. Or go to your room and go to sleep. You have to make sure that if the mother says no TV time, when the child goes to the father, this is what happens, or vice versa. And either the mother or the father says, oh yeah, you can go ahead and watch TV, and you disregard the other partner, the child notices that, and they'll pick up on that, and they'll come to you most often, right? That's not a good thing. So what you want to do as a parent, you also, for instance, when the child comes, hey dad or hey mom, can I watch TV? What did mom say? Or what did dad say? And then whatever they said, that's what's going to go. That's it. Mm-hmm. In front of them, you don't want to have two different point of views. Yes, you can have healthy conversations and disagreements. We always encourage parents to do that. It's very important. You should do that. That's very important. Now, I wanted to come from the youth's perspective now, right? We talked about parents. Now, let's say if you're the child, or once you get older, you're a youth, right? You're in your 16, 17, or even 20 or 20 plus, and you don't have that strong of a relationship with your parents. How do you go about that?
Well, what should you do? Yeah, so number one is to remember that you don't have a choice. right? And I think that's a message we really need to get to the youth. You don't have a choice in whether you can or can't have a relationship with your parents. You have to, by command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether you like it or not. Now that doesn't mean there's a certain type of relation, like there's flexibility in terms of how close you are, how much distance you put, because the fact of the matter is sometimes parents are destructive to their children, right? So the idea is this notion of I can just up and out and completely disconnect myself from my parents and only send them a text message before Eid. That's not the way it works at all. So that's the first thing that we're going to tell them. Get them in a certain parameter where, okay, there's a red line, I can't cross this. And then number two is, specifically for that age, is to realize that in most cases, right? I understand that there are some scenarios where it's quite bad. But in most cases, your parents are your number one shield against the dangers of the world. This is the fact of the matter. Fact of the matter. You like it or not, they are the people who are most concerned for you. Whether you realize it or not, whether you like it or not, it is the reality. And just, in this book, the doctor talks about how, and we know this, how this culture marketing targets your children. It targets them. Understand the wording here. You are a target for these commercials. And they want to wrap you in this web of consumerism, this web of living externalities. That's it, right? And there's a lot that can be said here, and it's really sad. Music, for example. For parents, do this. Open YouTube, right? And I want you to go to right here on the top right of YouTube, there is this like compass looking thing. If you go there and you go to trending, right, and you go to music, look at the music videos. Look at them. Right? I mean, it's unbelievable, the lewdness. And everybody's consuming this. Everybody. Somebody, I analyze these lyrics. What are these people really saying? What are they saying? And it's bad. But who is going to stop the children other than your parents, right? For the young ones here. It's your parents who want to protect you from them. But society wants you to be consumed by them. And this is the fact of the Western world. We no longer live we're all one village, and we all know each other, we all care about each other. That's gone, right? Unfortunately. Now, you have people who see you as nothing more than a money in their pockets. All they have to do is get it out of you. That's it. And the best way to do it is to make you a slave to what they're offering. And so, young ones, you need to realize your parents are your number one shield. And then number three, going off that, is your parents open doors for you, whether you realize it or not. One of the reasons I think marriage is so difficult, getting married, is so difficult, is because it's not done through parents. And that's very unfortunate. And so these young ones are sitting there they're trying to ask so many questions to vet this potential spouse, when the mother or the father, through their experience, 20 years of marriage, 25 years of marriage, seeing their nieces and their nephews and their siblings and all that's going on, they can vet that person in one setting, right? And then these kids, these young ones, I don't know. I should, and they even might say, no, I think this person's a good spouse, but I'm just nervous. It's when I got married, my father was with me when we visited the girl. I got married in Jordan, so my dad came. And it meant everything to me when he said, you know what, she seems good. Or else if it was left up to me, how do I know? So it really helps to know that, hey, I have a parent here standing by my side and pushing me to take the next step. Because a lot of these young ones, it's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I should wait. Maybe it's not worth it, etc. So that's another thing. Of course, I'm sure there are many other things.
So what I'm hearing from you is having a good balance of both. The person marrying, where your future spouse is also taking into consideration the parents'.
It's not about taking into consideration the parents' opinion, right? It is about somebody standing with you in this
So
process.
they're going in the process.
In their process, right?
Involving them in the process of.
Involving them in the process to the extent that they can help you make a good decision. Right? I don't want people to be confused and saying that, oh, my parents dictate who I marry. No, that's not what I'm saying. But for a guy, it means everything for them, for their father to be standing next to them when they make that decision. And for the girl, it's even more difficult. I mean, who's this man who's going to come and take care of me? I'm used to my father, right? For the mother to be there to guide her through that, or her father as well. It makes a huge difference.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to come and speak on this a little bit. So it's actually something that hits home for me personally, because when I came to the States, I was actually separated from my father, not by choice, for about 9 years. So I didn't see him from when I was 2 years old, and I saw him back when I was about 11 years old. That in itself, coming here, it was very difficult and very challenging, because when I came to America and my father is there, it became very different. It was semi-challenging and difficult for me to communicate with him. I knew that he was my father, but we never spent time together. We didn't know how to behave in front of him, didn't know how to speak to him, didn't know anything about him really, just the fact that he was my father. And then back a long time ago, my dad couldn't come to, being from Afghanistan, he couldn't actually come and visit every other year because of finances and other situations. So I just want to kind of fast forward, when I was in my 20s, I realized there was two things actually. Actually one thing that was very, two things actually. One, for some reason, as a child growing up, I didn't see my father very in a pleasing way. And the reason why that was is that when I had because I was surrounded with my cousins, my uncles were there, their parents, their fathers. So growing up, I realized and that used to really sting very badly when I would see my cousins with their parents and me not having my father. So I kind of had some resentment towards my father. And I had created, not understanding the full picture, scope of the purpose of why my father was here and why we were back home. I didn't see the bigger picture, right, because I was a child. But in my mind, I created this image that my dad probably doesn't like me, doesn't want me around. So I had actually created this growing up. And then when I got here, it was very difficult to have conversations with him because I didn't know how to speak to him, because we didn't have that emotional bond and that emotional connection. And over time, as I got older, once I hit my 20s, something that I did actually, my father tried to do his best, but he spoke to me to the level, a father speaks to their kid, at a very, a traditional military Afghani father, right? Not so much emotionally connected with me. And what happened was here, what I understood, and something that I wanted to share with everyone, especially the youngsters, is you also have a big role to play here. If you can understand, and if you understand the case scenario and why something isn't working out and why there is a disagreement constantly, A, you have to give it time, and 2, you have to put time into this relationship as well. What does that mean? So my father actually, in the past 30 years, he works in a gas station. He's been working in a gas station ever since he was in America. So what I would do when I was in my undergrad, it was hard for me to speak to him. I'm telling you the truth. It's so weird. It's like it flashes back. I get flashbacks. So what I would do when I was in undergrad, so when I finished school, I would drive down home, and then I knew my father would get out of work in the next 2-3 hours. So what I would do intentionally, and so Allah knows best, I would stop there. Even though it was very uncomfortable, I couldn't utter words out of my mouth. But I would stay there, and I would act like that. I was like, I'm just going to do homework. And I just sat there, while people were coming, I was in the gas station just doing homework. I didn't speak to him. I didn't do anything for a good week or 2. After 2 weeks, I was able to slowly speak to him. I was able to talk to him. He was able to talk to me because, again, that familiarity, something that we never shared. when we were young, we tried a different method. You know, I didn't even fully knew. I don't even think I understood the process of if this was gonna work or not. For me, it was more like I want to talk to him, but I couldn't. So what I did was, again, I took the time, even if it was for 2-3 hours. I just went and I just sat, you know, at his work, and that's it. And then our relationship actually picked up from then. And it's so amazing because even at times, you know, I've got my siblings here and they know this very well. My relationship is actually much stronger with my father than it is with my mother now.
Oh,
so anytime anything happens, my father and I, we communicate, we talk very easily, and everything changed. But that being said, you as a youth or as a young person, you know, anytime if you have any challenges or difficulties that let's say you probably went through in life, or you never had the chance to speak to your parents, right? I would say give it a try. Give it a try because it makes the biggest difference in your life. You're much happier. You can go out to programs together. They actually become your best friend. They literally become not your best friend, but your best person and your best supporter.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
So maybe I can help a little bit for the young ones. There's a story of a man who was an engineer, you know, did his 40 years in work and whatnot, retired, and his relationship with his children was right. It wasn't bad, it wasn't toxic, but clearly there wasn't a strong bond. And so, you know, one of his children, adult, 30s, he's like, how do I improve this relationship? His father was, or her father was, really not a talkative person, not very emotional. Like he doesn't connect emotionally and whatnot. And so somebody gave him the following idea. Go to your father and ask him if he liked his job. And so, like, what's that gonna do? So she goes and she asks him, Dad, you know, did you like your job? Because we don't really know. And she said, he paused and he started tearing up. He said, I never thought you actually cared. I never thought like the children actually cared. So our fathers and mothers have a lot of stories. Right? Like my own dad, for example. My dad's from Palestine. He witnessed a lot of the chaos earlier in his life. And I don't know anything about my grandfather. Like he never talks about him at all, even though my grandfather was a mayor of the town. And I got to learn about my grandfather through my great aunt, who I used to visit a lot in Jordan. She would tell me the stories and this and that. Like, why doesn't my dad talk about this? And all my siblings, like, yeah, he never talks about his childhood. My sister, only a few months ago, said, you know, for the first time he spoke about his childhood. And she said he started crying because he remembered all the trauma. That's why he didn't talk about it. But the idea here is that our parents have a lot of stories, a lot of richness in their childhood, and they just never share it because they think we don't care. So for the children, you can build that relationship by simply asking, you know, tell me about your childhood. Tell me about the things you did.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Again, it goes both ways, right? If you're the child, try to make time for your parent and sit there and talk to them. If you're a parent, there's going to be times where you're going to have to, you know, sit down and ask about, well, what are you watching? You know, when it comes to sports, when they're playing games, learn. You know, you have to spend time and you have to show that you also care, you know, in what they're doing, because that is going to help, and that's going to help your guys' relationship in the long term. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today. That is it for with my questions. I think I'll go ahead and open the floor for Q&A. Does anybody have questions for Sheikh Tarik? Yes.
Sure. So the point is, who are you going to choose to be your role model? Right? You're going to choose somebody who seems relevant to your goals. Right? And it doesn't have to be just religious. It could be even worldly. Let's say you want to be a big tech guru. You might look up to whoever, right? Why? Because they are in the place you want to be, you aspire to be. So you take them as a role model. Why? Because they have already reached the success you look for. So it's not an issue of what is success, but how do I choose my role model? Well, it's going to depend on what is my goal? Where do I want to be? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the, he told the Prophet to look at these different prophets, alayhi salatu wasalam. The idea is the Prophet, Allah is showing the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam a model that if he follows, he can expect the same results. Right? So the Prophet was dealing with people who are animus towards him. Well, how do I deal with these people? Where do I want to be? I want to be successful over them. Okay, here you have all these different prophets who went through the same thing and found success, model after them. That's the idea here. It's not, what I'm saying isn't what is, how do we define success, and if somebody doesn't reach their goals, doesn't mean, that's not what we're talking about here.
So what's the definition of success?
In what realm? What I'm saying, I'm not trying to give a particular definition of success. You define success in terms of where you want to be. That's how you choose a role model. But success in terms of a purely Islamic definition is, getting the paradise. Right?
I think success is going to.
Of course, right? But that doesn't negate me. If I want to be a researcher, I might take a non-Muslim researcher as a role model. Not because I think that's a path to the afterworldly success, but that's a path or a model for me to reach a worldly success. That's halal. Right? Contrary to what we're hearing a lot on social media, my personal opinion is I don't think it's about whether a woman has a career or not. It's about what she prioritizes. A woman who has a career, but her number one priority is family, I think her family is going to be just fine. But a woman who does not have a career, and her number one priority is socializing with her, lady friends, that's not a healthy environment. Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, just to give you the scope of her business, when they would send caravans out, think of all the caravans of Quraysh. Khadija's caravan was equivalent to everyone else combined, right? Yeah, she was a phenomenal mother, a phenomenal wife. Why? Is she some superhero? Does she have more than 24 hours? No, it's because she prioritized it, right? So maybe that's an alternative. But if you want to try and reconcile between two, then take the good of both and leave the bad of both, right? So if one is a disbeliever and the other is a believer, of course you want to model the belief of the believer, not the. But let's just say the disbeliever was simply more experienced in the realm than the non-Muslim. There's nothing wrong with taking that experience, if that makes sense. What Laith is talking about is even before marriage. Like the mindset of these young ladies is, I don't want a man, I don't care for a man, and they hit an age where, I want a child. And obviously I can only do that in marriage, so, I don't want to be married, what do I do? Let me get married, have a child, and just get divorced, I'll take half his money as well. Right? That's what you're talking about, see? So why is that the case? Right? I'm not talking about you, Laith, but the reason is because men don't know how to be men. But why did they get to that point? Why? Right? It has nothing to do with their lack of interest in men. But when they look at men, they're not men. That's why. Or else it's quite natural for a woman to be very close and to want to be around a man she feels safe around. And by safe, I don't mean just physically safe. I mean emotionally safe. I mean financially safe. Right? So it's not you, Laith. I'm just saying this is what happens. Now, of course, there are many reasons why men are like this now. It has to do with the way society is structured. It has a lot to do with movies and media. It has a lot to do with philosophies. It's a mess. It's an utter mess. But there's a very easy solution. Just self-discipline. You can learn how to improve yourself, right? I do this all the time. I'm always reading books. I'm always watching videos about how I can improve myself, right? Even if that's something, reading about a book about how to be a CEO. Well, I'm not a CEO, why would I read that book? Because it gives you the characteristics of a CEO, which will then be beneficial to how you engage your family, right? Now, I'm not saying it's this person's fault, that person's fault. It's a mess right now on both sides. But personally, I put the crux of the onus on men, right? Because maybe some people won't like me saying this, men are the center of the family. The man is the center. If the man is strong, the entire family stays together, the entire family is strong. But if the man is weak, then it doubles the burdens of the mother, and then she's discontent with her husband, and now she's stressed out, she can't take care of her kids. But if the man is strong, she's relaxed. And when she's relaxed, that's when the best comes out of her. But a man can bring out the best while they're under a lot of stress, right? That's all. This is the difference in creation. Doesn't mean one is better than the other. But that's, in my opinion, where it's coming from. In some scenarios, yes. I have told women in some scenarios. Now, if the divorce is done mutually, and it's just an agreement to separate, neither one has transgressed the rights of the other, then yeah, it's haram for a woman to take that money. But in most times, right, yes, women are 70% of the time, they're the ones who initiate divorce. Why? Do you really think a woman is going to leave a home she's comfortable in? She's not. Right? That's just how women are. And so what happens a lot of times, this man doesn't do anything. He doesn't pay any bills. He's abusing her. He's verbally harmful to her. Well, Islamically speaking, if she goes to a court, she can get compensated monetarily for those abuses. See what I mean here? So it's not as simple as it's haram every single scenario. Yes, generally, in standard rule, in a standard divorce, yes, it's haram. But there are circumstances, scenarios where it's not just, it's her right to take that money because of the damage that was done to her unfairly.
What scenario can you give?
What is it?
What scenario can you give me?
What scenario can she want?
Can you give me?
I gave you a scenario, abuse. So the man was physically abusive to her. She has right to compensation.
Of course we stand against physical abuse.
We stand against it, but we're talking about other legalities.
So then said that if a man physically abused a woman, she takes half.
Because a person who is harmed gets compensated for it. He has the right, there's a punishment for it. Well, how do you punish them? Now, if you're in a court where they imprisoned the man, then the punishment has been taken. But if that hasn't happened, then what kind of compensation can she get? She can take the monetary. I'll give you another scenario, right? Maybe a clearer scenario for you. And that is when the man does not pay for the bills. She's paying rent, she's paying the bills, she's paying for the kids' school, she's paying for everything. He's making money. He's saying, I don't want to, and she's paying for it. Now they get divorced. Well, he owes her all that money. So boundaries are incredibly important in raising kids. Incredibly, right? And what happens with parents is that they're intimidated. Like, oh, I'm afraid if I put too much boundaries, then it will deter the kids. And then when you put boundaries and you enforce it, the kids get all uffy and puffy and whatnot. Don't worry about any of that. They need to know that there are boundaries. And that will help them understand how to navigate lives, how to navigate their life, right? How to interact with other people. When they know the boundaries, then when somebody in the world tries to transgress those boundaries, wait a minute, I'm going to put you off to the side. So don't be intimidated by boundaries, but yes, we need to have reasonable boundaries. Reasonable. And we start with Quran and Sunnah. There is no relationships between boy and girl outside of marriage, period. Right? There's no flexibility in this. So you have to be very stern in that regard. Clothing. The Quran and Sunnah tells us. You can wear whatever color you want, you can wear whatever style you want, but you have to cover what the Quran tells us to cover, right? For men and women. In other areas, in terms of, like the strict bedtime, like 8:30, exactly 8:30. Do you need to be that strict? Or 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after, right? So this is where you have to ask the question. What I like to do is I ask myself, how important is this really? How important is it? To really sit with myself and think, is this really important? If it's not really important, then let it be flexible. If this is not what's going to make or break the child, Why enforce it? Like, why be strict about it? But if it's somewhat important, then we want to be somewhat, stern about it. So you as a father, you have that role. Don't be deterred by the kids and their frustrations and whatnot. No, that's the father. And one of the primary differences between mother and father, this is a really funny study. They studied the behavioral differences of a child between father and mother misbehaving. And they found that children misbehave with their mother 800% more than with their father. The question is why? But we want to be a little more precise. Mothers put boundaries, but they don't enforce it. Mothers put boundaries, but they're very loose with it. Fathers put boundaries. This is it. And the kids detect it. Now, I'm not telling mothers be more strict. That's not what I'm saying. This is the dynamic here, right? But you have to play that role. And don't deter. But be smart in terms of where you can be flexible and where you have to put your foot down. And the Quran really helps. If she wants to work, let her work, so long as it doesn't contradict with the responsibility of her family. Layth. It is not in a man's interest for his wife to be sitting at home doing nothing all day. She will call you 1,000 times. She will keep talking to you. She'll put all of it on you. Right? And I don't mean by this, distract her. That's not what I mean by it. But she needs to have her goals. That's healthy for her, which will be healthy for your kids, and which will be healthy for you. And you should encourage her. But at the same time, the agreement needs to be, for both me and you, family is number one. I go to work to provide for my family. You want to pursue a career, you want to work, you want to, follow your dreams. I'm 100% with you, so long as family is number one. That's what needs to happen. Right? What do you mean mix? Gender mixing? What's happening everywhere? How can you avoid it? Look, like if a lady has good character, she'll have good character everywhere. Whether she's mixing or not. If she doesn't have good character, even if it's in, Saudi Arabia, she'll find a way. Right? That's just the reality.
I think that's it. And if anybody else have any questions, we will, if Sheikh, if you're still available, he can ask, he can take those questions. But again, thank you so much on behalf of
Thank you for having me.
the masjid. We would like to thank you for being here.